You know, when you hear about high-stakes diplomacy, you think peace talks, right? But what if it's really about profit? Today, we're digging into claims that recent talks between the US and Russia aren't really about stopping a war, but about securing a massive business deal that's buried right in the middle of the battlefield. So it all really boils down to this one question. Are we watching a genuine push for world peace, or is this a calculated grab for profits from an active war zone? The sources we're looking at today argue it's definitely the latter. And the story, well, it starts deep underground. Okay, so first up, a prize beneath the battlefield. To really get what's going on with these negotiations, you first have to understand what's at stake beneath the soil of Ukraine. And believe me, it's a prize of almost unimaginable value. Get ready for this number. $15 trillion. Just let that sink in for a second. According to the reports, that's the estimated value of Ukraine's mineral resources. Now, this isn't just some footnote to the conflict. The source material we've reviewed argues it's the absolute central reason for the geopolitical drama we're seeing. And we're not just talking about any old minerals here. We're talking about lithium for the world's batteries, titanium for aerospace and defense, and get this, Europe's largest known deposits of graphite and rare earth elements. These are literally the building blocks of the entire 21st century economy, so whoever controls them controls a big piece of the future. But here's where it gets really complicated. As you can see from this chart, almost 40% of these critical mineral deposits are in Ukrainian territory that's currently occupied by Russia. And that one fact, it changes everything about the negotiation. Which brings us to our next section, two paths to the prize. This situation puts the US at a major crossroads, right? It's a dilemma with two very, very different paths to get access to all this mineral wealth. One path goes through Kyiv, and the other straight through Moscow. So on one side, you've got the official agreement with Ukraine. It grants American companies access, sure, but it is messy. It's complicated by all the war damage, and according to reports, President Zelensky is resisting what he sees as exploitative terms. But then there's Russia's offer. It's presented as clean, simple, a direct deal for access to the minerals in the land they occupy, cutting Kyiv out of the loop entirely. A former U.S. diplomat who was quoted by Reuters puts the strategy in pretty blunt terms. Putin knows Trump's playbook. Offer a deal that's hard to refuse, and he'll bite. The thinking here, according to the source, is that Putin is dangling this simple transactional prize, betting it's just way more appealing than a complex negotiation that's based on principles. And this leads us right into Section 3, transactional diplomacy. This really gets to the core of the strategy, a style of diplomacy that, at least according to these sources, is built on a very simple premise: profit over principle. So how did this whole pivot happen? Well, the timeline reported in the press is pretty revealing. It apparently kicks off in late February, when a heated meeting with Zelensky collapses with no deal. And what happens right after? A temporary halt in U.S. military aid to Ukraine. Then, by March, the diplomatic focus completely shifts. Trump's envoy is meeting with Putin to talk about, you guessed it, mineral access. That sequence suggests a very clear turn away from Kyiv and toward Moscow. And this reported quote from that really tense Oval Office meeting, it lays the conflict bare. You're gambling with World War III, and we're paying for it. This clash over the price of American support and who should ultimately profit from Ukraine's resources reportedly pushed the administration to start seriously considering Russia's alternative deal. Okay, Section 4, Peace, Claims versus Reality. Now, all of this is happening under the public banner of peace. But the sources we've looked at draw a really sharp contrast between the official rhetoric and the actual actions on the ground. On the one hand, you have the public claim, I'm working with Putin to stop the killing. But on the other hand, you have the reported reality, Russia launching over 200 missiles into Ukraine. At the same time, U.S. weapons shipments to Kyiv are halted and no new sanctions are put on Moscow. The disconnect between the talk of peace and the reality of war, it's pretty stark. And a Ukrainian commentator in an op-ed for the Kyiv Post argues this whole approach is just fundamentally flawed. They write, Russia's war is about imperial ambition, not economics. No mineral deal will stop Putin's tanks. That's a powerful argument, right? That a business deal just completely misreads why the war is being fought in the first place. So let's talk about the global shockwaves, our fifth and final section. Because this diplomatic strategy, it doesn't exist in a bubble. According to the reporting, it's sending major shockwaves across the globe, messing with critical supply chains and rattling some very old alliances. To really understand the American urgency here, you have to look at this number. Right now, China controls the refining of over 90% of the world's rare earth elements. Breaking that kind of dependency is a huge strategic goal for the US. That vulnerability, that's the engine driving this entire chase for Ukraine's minerals, whether it's through a deal with Kyiv or one with Moscow. But the potential solution is creating a whole new set of problems. European allies are, according to reports, seriously alarmed. They're worried a US side deal would give them unfair access, that it could fracture NATO unity, and, maybe most critically, that it would effectively legitimize Russia's annexation of sovereign Ukrainian land. And this sentiment, captured by an analyst on social media and cited in the source material, seems to sum up a growing public take on these talks. Classic Trump, profit over principle. He'll deal with Putin if it means US companies get rich. It frames the whole thing as a cynical, but maybe pragmatic, business play. And that brings us right back to where we started, to the heart of the matter. After laying out all the evidence from the sources, the question is still there. Is this some new form of diplomacy, one designed to break a stalemate? Or is it a transactional deal that trades away the very idea of a just peace for the promise of profit? The answer to that is going to define not just the future of Ukraine, but maybe the new rules of power itself.